Someone who never feels good enough achieves something significant. They reach a goal they've worked toward for months or years. They receive recognition, praise, acknowledgement, and for a brief moment, maybe a few hours, they feel relief. But the relief doesn't last, because almost immediately, their mind begins to recalibrate, to find the flaws in what they accomplished, to focus on what could have been better, to compare their achievement to someone else's greater one, to dismiss it as luck, timing, or something that doesn't really count. And if you've ever been that person, if you've ever stood in the middle of success and felt nothing but emptiness, then you know this isn't about ambition. This isn't about having high standards. This is about carrying an impossible measuring stick that moves every time you get close to reaching it. This is about a belief so deeply embedded in your psychology that no amount of external validation can touch it. The belief that you are fundamentally, permanently, irreparably not enough. People who never feel good enough carry a particular kind of exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of working hard, but the exhaustion of working endlessly toward a finish line that doesn't exist. They achieve and immediately set a new, higher bar. They succeed and immediately focus on where they fell short. They receive compliments and immediately discount them as politeness, pity, or mistake. They look at their accomplishments and see only what's missing, what's inadequate, what proves they're still not where they should be. And the strangest part is that, from the outside, they often appear successful, capable. Together, people see someone who achieves, who produces, who excels. They don't see someone who is internally collapsing under the weight of never being enough, who measures their worth by an impossible standard and finds themselves lacking every single time. Someone asks, why can't you just be happy with what you've done? Why can't you see how far you've come? And you don't know how to explain that seeing your progress doesn't change the feeling. That intellectually knowing you've accomplished something doesn't translate to actually feeling adequate. That your mind has two completely separate systems running. One that can recognize achievement objectively, and one that dismisses it emotionally as insufficient evidence of worth. And the emotional system, the one that formed long before logic could intervene, is louder, is more persistent, is more deeply wired into how you experience yourself. So, you should feel proud. Others would be satisfied with what you've done. But you're not others. And the feeling of not being enough persists, regardless of evidence to the contrary. Most people think feeling not good enough is about low self-esteem that can be fixed with positive affirmations or achievement. But people who live with this experience understand the truth. It's not about esteem. It's about a core belief formed so early and reinforced so consistently that it became part of your identity. It's the lens through which you interpret every experience. And that lens is biased toward confirming what you already believe about yourself. You could achieve everything on your list and your mind would simply expand the list. You could receive universal praise and your mind would find the one person who didn't praise you. You could objectively excel and your mind would find someone who excelled more. Because the issue isn't what you do. It's what you believe you are. And what you believe is that you are lacking, deficient, falling short, not enough. There is a voice in you that never quiets, a voice that catalogs your inadequacies with precision and persistence, that notices every mistake, every flaw, every moment you fell short of perfection, that compares you to others constantly and always finds you wanting, that interprets neutral feedback as criticism and positive feedback as either undeserved or temporary. This voice doesn't rest when you sleep. It doesn't pause when you achieve. It's always there, always assessing, always finding you insufficient. And over time, you don't even question it anymore. It becomes so familiar that you assume it's telling you the truth, that you really aren't good enough, that everyone else is just being kind, that one day they'll all discover what you already know, that you're a fraud. An imposter, someone who's gotten further than they deserve through luck rather than merit. People who never feel good enough often carry an invisible curriculum. They know what it's like to achieve something significant and feel nothing, to receive recognition and immediately discount it, to be praised and feel like they're deceiving people. They know the exhaustion of perfectionism, of never being able to rest because rest means falling behind. They know what it's like to measure themselves against impossible standards and feel shame when they inevitably fall short. They know how to smile through compliments, while internally dismissing every word. They know the loneliness of standing in success and feeling empty. They develop high achievement as a coping mechanism, hoping that if they just accomplish enough, the feeling will finally change. But it never does, because the problem isn't achievement, it's the belief system underneath it. Research in psychology shows that the belief of not being good enough often originates in childhood environments where love, attention, or approval were conditional, where a child learned that their value was determined by their performance, their behavior, their ability to meet expectations that often exceeded their developmental capacity. Maybe you had parents who only showed affection when you succeeded. Maybe you had caregivers who were impossible to please, who moved to goalposts every time you reached them. Maybe you grew up in an environment where mistakes were met with criticism, disappointment, or withdrawal of love. Maybe you were, compared to siblings, peers, or impossible standards. Maybe you internalized messages from culture, from media, from systems that profit from making people feel inadequate. In these environments, the child's mind makes a devastating conclusion. I am not inherently valuable. I must earn my worth. And the earning never ends. There's a particular pain in never feeling good enough that others struggle to understand. It's not the pain of occasional self-doubt. It's the pain of chronic, pervasive, unrelenting sense of deficiency, of waking up every day feeling like you're already behind, of moving through life with a constant background hum of inadequacy, of achieving things that should make you proud and feeling nothing but emptiness, of wanting desperately to feel enough, to feel satisfied, to feel like you can finally rest, and never being able to access that feeling, no matter what you do. What makes this particularly devastating is how it affects every area of life. In relationships, you can't believe someone could genuinely love you. You wait for them to discover your inadequacy and leave. You interpret their love as temporary, conditional, or mistaken. In work, no accomplishment is ever enough. You could be objectively successful and still feel like a failure. You focus on the one thing that went wrong rather than the 99 that went right. In creativity, you can't create freely because everything must be perfect, and perfection is impossible. So you either produce nothing or produce with such agonizing self-criticism that the joy of creation dies. People who never feel good enough often develop a complicated relationship with success. They crave it desperately, believing that if they just achieve enough, the feeling will change. But they also fear it, because success brings visibility, and visibility means more opportunities to be exposed as inadequate. So they're caught in a bind, driven to achieve, to prove their worth, but terrified of the exposure that achievement brings. This creates a push-pull dynamic where they sabotage themselves at the threshold of success, or achieve, and then immediately undermine their accomplishment, or succeed publicly while feeling privately fraudulent. There's also a way that never feeling good enough becomes a form of safety. If you never let yourself feel adequate, then you never become complacent. You keep working, keep improving, keep striving. And while this creates achievement, it also creates suffering. Because you're running on a treadmill that never stops. You're chasing a feeling of enoughness that your psychology won't allow you to experience. And the running becomes your identity. You become someone defined by striving rather than being, by doing rather than existing, by what you produce rather than who you are. What people don't understand is that this isn't something you can think your way out of. You can't logic yourself into feeling adequate. You can't make a list of your accomplishments and suddenly feel good enough. Because the belief isn't logical. It's emotional. It's stored in parts of your brain that formed before you had language, before you could think critically. And those parts don't respond to evidence. They respond to experience, to felt sense, to repeated patterns that slowly create new neural pathways. This is why affirmations often feel hollow, why achievement doesn't fix it, why someone telling you you're enough doesn't change anything. Because the belief is deeper than words can reach. Sleep often becomes difficult for people who never feel good enough. They lie awake cataloging their failures, their inadequacies, everything they should have done better, or they wake up with immediate anxiety about all they need to accomplish to be worth something. Rest feels dangerous because rest means not producing, and not producing means not earning worth. So they push themselves relentlessly, even when their bodies beg for recovery. But here's something crucial that people who never feel good enough rarely hear. The measuring stick you're using is broken. It was broken from the beginning. It was designed to be unattainable. Because if you're measuring your worth by achievement, be perfection by being better than others, by never making mistakes, then you've accepted a system that guarantees you'll always fail. Because you're human, and humans are inherently imperfect, inherently limited, inherently flawed. You were never meant to be perfect. You were never meant to exceed everyone. You were never meant to achieve your way into worthiness. Your worth was supposed to be inherent, not earned, not proven, not achieved. Simply there, because you exist. The path forward isn't about accomplishing more. It's about questioning the belief system that tells you accomplishment determines value. It's about recognizing that the voice saying you're not enough isn't telling you truth. It's repeating programming from environments that were broken, from people who couldn't give you unconditional acceptance, from systems that profit from your insecurity. That voice isn't you. It's what happened to you. And what happened to you doesn't define what you are. Something shifts when people who never feel good enough begin to practice radical acceptance, not of their achievements, but of their humanity. When they start to recognize that being flawed, being imperfect, being limited, being human, doesn't make them deficient. It makes them real. When they begin to separate their worth from their productivity, when they learn to sit with the discomfort of not producing, not achieving, not proving, and discover they still exist, they still matter. They're still here, and their presence has value regardless of output. There's a profound moment that often comes in this process. The moment when you accomplish something and instead of immediately moving the goalpost, you pause. You notice what you did. You allow yourself to feel something other than emptiness. Not necessarily pride. Not necessarily satisfaction. Maybe just acknowledgement. Just a moment of that happened and it's real without the instant dismissal. This pause feels foreign. It feels almost wrong. Your mind will rush to fill it with criticism, with qualification, with reasons why it doesn't count, but you stay with it anyway. You practice the pause, and slowly, over time, the pause gets longer. The criticism gets quieter. The ability to receive your own accomplishment, even partially, begins to develop. People who work through this often discover something liberating, that the feeling they've been chasing, the feeling of being enough, was never going to come from achievement. It was never going to come from external validation. It was only ever going to come from internal acceptance, from the decision, repeated daily, to stop measuring themselves against impossible standards, to stop treating their worth as something to be earned, to stop believing the voice that says they're insufficient, not because they've proven that voice wrong through accomplishment, but because they've recognized that voice was never qualified to judge them in the first place. And maybe the most important truth of all is this: you are always enough, not because you achieved, not because you're perfect, not because you exceeded others, but because worth isn't something humans earn. It's something humans have by virtue of being human. The system that taught you otherwise was wrong. The people who made you feel inadequate were projecting their own wounds. The standards you're holding yourself to were designed to be unattainable, and you've been exhausting yourself trying to reach something that was never real. If you are someone who never feels good enough, who achieves and feels empty, who works endlessly toward adequacy that never comes, who measures themselves against impossible standards and always finds themselves lacking, then maybe it's time you hear this. You are not insufficient. You're not deficient. You're not failing at being human. You're succeeding at being human, because being human includes imperfection, includes limitation, includes falling short sometimes. That's not evidence of inadequacy. That's evidence of reality. The voice that tells you you're not enough is a liar. It's a recording from a past that couldn't see you clearly. And you don't have to keep listening to it. You can turn down its volume. You can question its authority. You can recognize it as old programming rather than current truth. And you can begin, slowly and imperfectly, to build a new relationship with yourself. One where your value isn't contingent on performance. Where your worth doesn't require proof. Where you are allowed to be exactly as you are, flawed and limited and beautifully, sufficiently human. That permission won't come from achieving more. It can only come from you, and you've always been allowed to give it. You just didn't know, but now you do. And that knowing, however small it feels right now, is where your freedom begins.